This is Kickoff on talkSPORT with Hugh Woozencroft and Dean Ashton, the former West Ham and Norwich City striker. Up next, we're going to talk about the European Super League, the league that was. It lasted all of about 72 hours before virtually every single club in it put a statement out over the last sort of 24 hours. Going back on that, today apologies came from the likes of Joel Glazer at Manchester United, John W. Henry at Liverpool, Ferran Soriano, the chief executive of Manchester City, all claiming that these clubs had no idea the fans felt this way. It has boggled the mind, Dean. But let's speak to someone who might understand why these clubs charted this course. It has been disastrous, by the way. David Bernstein, the former Manchester City chairman, the former FA chairman. Good evening. Thanks for joining us on Kickoff.
Good evening. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure to have you, David. I wonder, as you saw the news last night, it was amazing here on talkSPORT to be announcing the breaking news as clubs backed away from it. Were you surprised by that? And especially that it happened so soon?
Well, I'm really most surprised that they could get involved in a project like this in such an amateurish way. I mean, it is embarrassing, really, for the clubs and for the game generally, and amazing that they should misjudge the situation. You know, these are wealthy people with huge banks of advice, lawyers and merchant banks behind them. So, but once, I must say, it was great to see the opposition united as it was, fans, government, and the football authorities. So for once, football really did come together.
Do you truly believe it was the fans, the government, that football family coming together that forced them to backtrack, or was it something else? No,
I think it was that. I think this was a serious proposal. I don't think it was a bluff of some sort. I think it was a serious proposal that was badly misjudged, and when they saw the intensity of the opposition, and even from the Prime Minister and from Prince William, I think that really got to them. They could see a huge downside sort of opening up for them.
Do you think that it was just purely greed, or do you think that because of the pandemic, financially, some of these clubs have obviously been able to service the debt that they've had, but all of a sudden, because of the pandemic, they've suddenly not been able to, and actually behind the scenes, financially, they're not as in a good position as maybe we think?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think just a little bit of recent history. A couple of months ago or whatever it was, we had Project Big Picture. That was an attempt for some of the big clubs to grab sort of more territory. That fell through within a week. Then we still have the expansion of the Champions League. Now that's still on the table, and that's another attempt by what will be the bigger clubs to get a bigger slice of the cake. And I think that's got all sorts of implications for English football. And now we have this Super League. So I think it was a mixture of things. I think part of it was greed, but I think some of the clubs, I say some, not all, I do have financial problems. I've got huge debts. I think there's one English club, who should remain nameless, who I think have got a massive debt of maybe approaching £1 billion. And then you've got Real Madrid and Barcelona, who we know are heavily indebted. And as you quite rightly say, the COVID situation has been a real problem, obviously, for football. But what surprised me, and I welcome your view on this, is why there's been no attempt to get control over player wages. In most industries, if your income goes down, your expenditure has to come down. But players' wages in the Premier League particularly, the billions and billions and billions of pounds that have gone out, haven't been restrained or controlled at all. And that must be a big part of this problem.
There's a lot of speculation in football, and it goes up and down the pyramids as well. I think these owners maybe thought this was a way of making some of the money they've spent back, to be frank. And having control, particularly over their own rights, is a way of making hundreds of millions per season more than they already do. There's a cynic in me, though, that thinks they'll be back, David. I truly believe that these clubs will have something else up their sleeve. There's a part of me that thinks they might just back away from the Champions League for a year and show UEFA exactly what that product would be without them. Do you think they'll be back with something else?
Well, it's not impossible. They must take cognizance of what's happened in this last 72 hours. They can't keep on affording to sort of make moves like this and then find they get knocked back again. At the end of the day, the football pyramid this is not an American sport. This isn't a closed league. The football pyramid is a fantastic, invention. It's what keeps the whole game alive. It's that, you know, I was chairman of Manchester City. When I became chairman, we just dropped down to the third level of English football, to the first division. Now, at the end of my first season, we beat Gillingham in the playoff final at Wembley in a great match. And look at Manchester City now, one of the richest clubs in the world. That could happen to, well, not to anybody, but that could happen to other clubs. I mean, a club like Everton or Aston Villa or Newcastle haven't been quite so lucky. But they're all very big clubs. They could easily be in the situation that City are in if had live events been a bit different. So the whole dynamic of promotion, relegation, and so on is what is the lifeblood, I think, of the game. Yes, it doesn't maximise income necessarily for the top few clubs, but there is more to football than that.
What can plausibly happen next, David? What can plausibly happen next? Will there be legislation?
Well, as you've seen, the government has accelerated the announcement of a fan-led review, which is going to be chaired by Tracy Crouch. And one of the things in the fan-led review is to consider the appointment of an independent regulator. Now, I'm working with a group of people, including Gary Neville and Helen Grant, the ex-Minister of Sport, and Lord Mervyn King, and Andy Burnham, some very powerful people, all united with a love of football. There's no money involved for us. This is a voluntary thing. And we produced a manifesto, Saving the Beautiful Game. We did that 6 months ago in anticipation of a lot of this sort of stuff. And we do need a lot of change in English football. A great deal of change is needed. And I'm hoping that this disaster of the last few days will be a catalyst. It's got the Prime Minister's attention, the government's attention, the opposition is right at it as well. So, I think there's a chance. This is probably a one-off chance, a unique chance for some real change in the game, which I'm sure most people will approve of. As part of our manifesto, we did a survey of fans, and it was amazing. 80% of fans that we surveyed wanted to see substantial and radical change in this country in our football.
David Bernstein, it's been a real pleasure to speak to you on talkSPORT this evening. That's David Bernstein, the former Manchester City and FA chairman as well, with some interesting views around what might happen next in English football.